Oh, we talking draft today. I got the coach with me, Coach Keith Sanchez, and we're going to set the record straight and get all y'all ready for the NFL draft. We'll do it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
I took my glasses off for this one because I don't need to see a thing. I just need to hear what my guest today has to say, and that is Coach Keith Sanchez. Welcome to Locked On NFL. My man David Harrison is out handling personal business today, but it's the same goodness that you get twice a day here on Locked On NFL. I hope you are tuning in wherever you get your podcasts, whether you watch them or listen to them. Make sure you tap in each and every day to make sure you do not miss an episode. An episode today that is brought to you and sponsored by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. And shout out to the everydayers that join us every single day. We really, really appreciate you. I'm going to tell you where we're going. At the end of this draft, at the end of the show, we'll talk about, will Cleveland draft quarterback Shador Sanders? A lot of people have said that's what it looks like because the New York Giants did something in between all of that stuff. I'm going to tell you why the Patriots paying Stefon Diggs is kind of shaky to me, not just the money, but the attitude that comes along with it. And what effect does that have on the top five of the draft? And that's where we're going to start. We're going to start at the very top. We think the draft starts at pick 2. Pick 1 seems like it's Cam Ward, and it seems like he's already probably in Nashville buying in my house, Keith. Keith Sanchez, a lot of stuff happened yesterday, man, and we'll start with Russell Wilson agreeing to a deal that could pay him up to $21 million on a one-year deal for the New York Giants. How do you feel about that?
I think the New York Giants made a smart move, and the reason is that people forget, and I'm guilty of it too, right? That I've mocked them Shador Sanders so many times, right? But the truth of the matter is, if you view it from the perspective of evaluation, is that there are only 2 premier quarterbacks, right? So you're not in that top 2. So your option to guarantee yourself getting a quarterback was either trade up, with now you're leveraging more picks, right, to be able to move up to 1 or 2 to get your guy, or you have to sit there and hope, right? And the worst position to be in on draft night is just hoping, right? So they had to put themselves in position where just to kind of put themselves to a spot where, like, you know what, we have a baseline and a foundation, and we know we have a starting quarterback. And in my opinion, looking at Russell Wilson, I think he's a better than what is advertised quarterback. I think he's functionable. I think he's better than what they've had the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years than Daniel Jones, even best years. And this is what happens is that, you know, Russell Wilson can play the game of football, right? What you're trying to figure out, this young wide receiver core, outside of Malik Neighbors, they've also drafted Jalen Hyatt really high. They drafted Wan'Dale Robinson really high. They drafted Theo Johnson in the 3rd, 4th round. So you're trying to figure out, what is your young nucleus of wide receivers, if they're really good or not. Russell Wilson has been there, done that. And if he's not the long-term plan, at least you get an answer for that next year.
Yep, and see, this goes into Joe Shane. This goes into Brian Daboll possibly fighting for their jobs. And what they're trying 100%. To show, they're trying to show that everything isn't messed up. If we get competent quarterback play, I didn't say great, I said competent. And it is obviously the Giants know they ain't going for nothing this year because of the division they're in, for one. They just want to show we can win 8, 9 games. These guys are competent. Now we just got to go find our dude, and they probably think that dude is in another draft. Listen to Patricia Traynor when she discusses this, and then we'll get more from Keith.
Yep.
A year after failing to reach a deal with Russell Wilson to be a part of their quarterback solution, Wilson and the New York Giants have agreed to terms on a 1-year deal reported by The Athletic to be worth up to $21 million with $10.5 million guaranteed. Wilson will join a room that already includes Jameis Winston, signed last week to a 2-year deal worth $8 million, and Tommy DeVito, who returns on an exclusive rights free agent deal. But more importantly, the signing of Wilson, even though it's just a 1-year deal, likely means that the Giants will not be pressed to force a pick at quarterback if they keep the number 3 overall spot in the draft order. Instead, the Giants can go best available if they keep that spot, with their likely options including Abdul Carter, edge rusher from Penn State, or Travis Hunter, receiver/cornerback out of Colorado. Now, that said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Giants won't take a quarterback in this coming draft. They could still look to get one on day 2, and there is always a possibility that they trade back up into the bottom of the first round to get a quarterback if there's one that they really, really like. But as far as the 3rd overall pick goes, it would be surprising if the Giants go quarterback at that spot.
I agree with Patricia, and I'll say something else. A lot of times we sit and look at a draft pick, and I've been going through this with Jaguar fans. Because it's not the player they want, they seem to come up with a actually reason and say, well, you take him, you're still going to have a hole over here. Instead of just saying, yeah, if I take Travis Hunter, I'm lining them up right next to Malik Neighbors. That's what I want you to be focusing on, what you're going to get. Because one player doesn't fix everything, Keith, but he makes them nasty in terms of playmaking.
Yeah, 100%. And also, this is the other thing, that depending on what position they're going after, it now gives them flexibility to potentially move back, right? Because the 2 positions that are sitting there, you talk about Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, were good for the Giants because they have Malik Neighbors, so they have a wide receiver 1. And then on the defensive side of the football, they have edge rushers in Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeau. So they can sit there and say, hey, do we want to go to either those 2 positions, draft offensive line, or do we want to move back to potentially pick 7 or 8? And maybe we have a Matthew Golden rated just as high as a Travis Hunter. Maybe we want to go get a big-bodied wide receiver in Teodoro McMillan at potentially pick 15. So it freed them up to have flexibility to where, like I said, they don't enter draft night feeling over-leveraged, right? And I like the pickup by them.
I do too. And if you get to number 3 and 2 quarterbacks have gone, guess what? You are now the king of this draft, because I believe the 2 best players in the draft are those 2 guys you just mentioned, right? So what happens is you can sit there and you're the New York Giants. And what if you do go back a little bit and you get Will Campbell? And then in the 2nd round, because you gave up, somebody gave you a 2nd round pick, a 2nd and a 3rd, I would think. Then you sit there and get that Higgins kid to go with Malik Neighbors, a guy that complements Malik Neighbors. There's one thing about playing the game of draft day, but then there's another thing about actually getting guys who can really play and not worrying about, did they get value or did they get the right pick? I tell you what, we headed down a nice little road here. We're going to keep doing it. I'm going to get to more, and we're going to talk about Stefan Diggs getting paid. He's been in the news for who he might be dating. Well, I ain't mad at him about it, right? But the money he just got, that's going to get even a little bit easy for him. And we'll talk about that and more here on Locked On NFL. As told you at the top of the show, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Game Time. Imagine watching your favorite team and feeling the energy of the crowd and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, making it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. Now, mandatory that you pay attention to this. Game Time Picks is a curation process that makes it easier to find a better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. Everyone doesn't have that, man. The curation makes the process so much easier and actually makes you want to come back for more. Now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Wednesday edition of Locked On NFL. We are riding out with Coach Keith Sanchez. Keith, tell them about you, man. You're on Locked On NFL draft with Damian Parsons. Give them a little bit of history of who my dog is.
Yeah, man. So for those who don't know, I spent 6 years at LSU, was a lead personnel analyst over there, so helped constructing that roster. And some may say that been the best college football team of all time in 2019. And then I made the transition, right? So I could come talk to guys like yourself, with Tony Wiggins, one of the best in the business. But man, still just in love with the process, in love with football. But I'm really appreciating getting the opportunity to be able to speak to the fans, right, and allow them to, give them a different lens to the game of football and how roster construction and decisions are actually made behind the scenes. Because I think sometimes they're a lot more simpler than what people think. And I know you try to convey that too in your message.
I do try to convey that message. And I'll tell you this, I've been telling people for 3 years, because a buddy of mine told me he used to be a scout with the Jaguars, and then he went to the Big Ten. He was at HBCUs, and then he ended up in the SEC at a huge school, and he's still out there floating around. And I keep telling people they are making the college, and this started a few years back.
Yep.
These college programs with NIL are now being run like NFL personnel departments, and they're
100%.
getting more guys with that experience. And it's all about the allocation of money and where you're going to put all of this in. You can't sign a 5-star quarterback this year and then next year and pay them all without cheating your roster somewhere. So the people that have the type of experience are NFL folks, and that's why when we start talking about prospects, I'm like, yeah, he might be the best player available, but they know they can't do that because he won't be on the field. And that's the conversation we're going to have with Abdul Carter in a minute. I want to talk about the Patriots.
Let's talk
because they, when we ended the season, for them to be as bad as they were record-wise, a lot of people were like, they're in a good spot. That's because Drake May showed what he showed. They had all that cap space, and then I guess you couldn't go any lower than the coaches that they had. Now they got Mike Vrabel, who understands the Patriot way, but he's a little bit edgy. He's done some things in free agency. I sat there and had them taking Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter at number 3. I don't know that might happen now. They might take Membu or Will Campbell, somebody you probably are a little bit familiar with.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think if you look at it, right, they've addressed the wide receiver position in free agency, and they've addressed the front 7, right? I think they signed the edge rusher and the defensive lineman. So I think what they're doing is freeing themselves up to take an offensive tackle. And I think about Mike Vrabel, right? And we know his history, first of all, the New England Patriots, right? And he was in that era. It wasn't the Tom Brady drop back 50 times, right?
No.
They won Super Bowls, defense and run game, right? Managing the clock, no turnovers, things like that. And in his time in Tennessee, right? It was Derrick Henry. It was Ryan Tannehill. Don't turn the football over, and we're going to punch people out on defense. I think he's trying to do the same thing in New England. So I can see them going offensive tackle. And one of the best butt kickers in this offensive line class is Will Campbell. Now, whether he's going to play tackle or guard, or whether he has 33-inch arms or 32 7/8, listen, he's 315 pounds, right? And you're going to feel that part. That's what matters. And I think that Mike Vrabel wants to go that direction.
It's a trip, man, that something as small as a fingernail is going to cause somebody to go, oh, nah, he 32 7/8. Nah, he can't play. And literally, if his fingernail just grows a little bit, he's 33. That's odd. I'm going to tell you something before we get to the signing with Mike debate.
Yep.
I'm going to let you think about this. Mike Vrabel probably wants to draft Ashton Genty. I'm dead serious. And you know why I say it, because what he wants an identifying running back where he can just turn around and pound the rock, and go play action. But listen to Mike debate. He's going to talk about the signing of one Stefon Diggs.
At long last, the New England Patriots have provided a number 1 caliber receiver to quarterback Drake May. I'm Mike Debate, host of Locked On Patriots, and Foxborough is abuzz as free agent wide receiver Stefon Diggs has reached an agreement on a 3-year, $69 million deal, including $26 million guaranteed with your New England Patriots. And the 31-year-old immediately upgrades the Patriots wide receiver room. Diggs visited the Patriots last week, took a physical, and apparently New England was comfortable enough to offer him a pretty lucrative deal. With Diggs in the fold, May now has a receiver which will automatically command the attention of opposing defenses. Prior to last season, Diggs posted 6 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons for both the Minnesota Vikings and the Buffalo Bills. But beyond being an upgrade in talent, Diggs also provides a veteran presence to a young wide receiver room. All in all, New England Patriots fans were clamoring for an offensive weapon all offseason long. They clearly have one in Stefon Diggs.
Now, Mike Vrabel, you got to get him, you got to twist his arm to get outside receivers. So if he's going to get one, you know he's going to get a dude that's proven. He's going to get a professional route runner, a guy, and he ain't going to take none of that crap from Diggs. And technically it's a 1-year, $26 million deal. Yep. They keep going with the deal if he works out, if he doesn't. My biggest concern is, do you see the demonstrative Stefon Diggs, who kind of is like Dez Bryant, and sometimes that is misunderstood? Do you see that in New England, and how does that get in the way of Drake May's development?
Yeah, that's what I don't want to say worried me, right? But if I had to have a pros and cons of this signing, the pros is, hey, you get a veteran wide receiver that's been there before, that's done that, that's productive, that you don't have to question, like with the Treylon Burks situation, right? Now, the flip side with the cons, if you're the GM, you have to ask yourself, why is he coming here, right? And what I mean is this, that 14, right? You're talking about the Vikings, you talk about the Bills, the Texans, and then now us, right? Coming off an injury, this is 14. He's a veteran wide receiver. Most guys at this position in their career, they usually just want to win, right? They want to go to a winning situation. So if he re-signed with the Bills or went back to the Texans or was with the Packers or something like that, you wouldn't question necessarily intended motive. I think that the GM potentially had that thought. That's why it's more of a one-year deal. That's why I'm glad you broke that down, Tony. But I look at it and I say this, that you're going to have to pay attention to the season as it goes, because he gets his money. And then now, do we believe that the Patriots going to start off 8-2? Probably not. What is the attitude going to be like if they're 4-6, right? If they're making progress, but not the progress that he wants, right? And then another thing is this, that you have to look at it. Stefon Diggs has always had good ball production. Going back to when Kirk Cousins was throwing the football at Minnesota. What happens now when he's having maybe 4 or 5 straight weeks where it's only 3-4 receptions and 50 yards? So you have to seriously think about those things.
It's 2 times when diva wide receivers can bother the chemistry of the team.
Yep.
One is when he's not getting the ball and you're winning, AJ Brown, and you know what? You keep winning and all is good and everybody kisses the makeup. And then when he ain't getting it enough when you're losing, that is a problem. So It's like, so basically what I'm saying is diva wide receiver don't get the ball. He getting upset regardless of the situation that he's in. I like it. I like it because from New England standpoint, they have the money and you got to spend it. You can't carry all that cap space over. They probably will eventually get a little letter from the league saying, okay, y'all got a whole bunch of money. You better spend it on somebody.
Yeah.
Right. So now you come into the game and at least teams, when they look at them and the draft doesn't end in round 1, they can add another receiver in they'll probably go get Savion Williams or something to complement him and have a big physical dude that can block and also can turn the game over. Yeah, man. So, the draft doesn't end in round 1, but some people think it does. Now, speaking of draft not ending in round 1, the Cleveland Browns, they need a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to figure out what's going on with them at pick number 2 and why I think that's the key to the entire draft. And then I'm going to get Keith to explain why Abdul Carter could be a good fit in Jacksonville without moving Trayvon Walker inside. We'll talk about that and more here on Locked On NFL. All right, back in the flash, just like we always are here on Locked On NFL. I got to mention this. Make sure you catch my friends, Coach Keith Sanchez and Damian Parsons on Locked On NFL. I'm talking about Keith like he's not even here, right? Hey, man, nobody does it better. They have all the experience in the world, and they break it down with the practicality that makes you really, really understand what these guys can and can't do in the draft. Make sure you make Locked On NFL Draft your second listen of the day. All right, Keith, we're going to listen to my man Spencer German, who has done a really, really good job since he's come to Locked On Browns, and we want him to explain what are the Cleveland Browns going to do now that Russell Wilson is gone? Does that mean they are going quarterback at number 2? This is funny because there's a lot of people that believe the Giants did what they did because they don't think Shador is going to be there. I think the Giants did what they did independent of that. But listen to Spencer German, and he'll give you his spiel on that number 2 pick.
Another quarterback domino has fallen. Another veteran off the market, off the board, as Russell Wilson is headed to the New York Giants. 1-year deal, $10.5 million guaranteed, chance to earn up to $21 million next year. And I kind of wonder if it came down to money. That's maybe a little rich for the Browns, but the 10.5 guarantee wouldn't have seemed too crazy. I think they maybe could have gotten there with incentives. Who knows? But the bigger thing here is what this means for the Browns' future in terms of finding a veteran quarterback. We know they've been in search for one. We know that Carson Wentz is their backup plan, reportedly. Does this mean they immediately pivot to him, or is Kirk Cousins still in play for them? There's a lot that still has to unfold. The Browns are going to pursue a veteran in some capacity, but it is slim pickings at this point with Russell Wilson off the market. We will talk about it coming up on Wednesday's episode of the Locked On Browns podcast. Plenty to get into. We'll talk to you then, Cleveland.
Now, one of the comps I've had for Shador Sanders has been Deshaun Watson, but I've always tempered that by saying, but he ain't that good of a runner, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of, he's probably a little bit smaller physically, or maybe even close to the same size that Deshaun was when he came to the league, about 6'2", 212 or something like that. But talks about the velocity. Remember, they questioned Deshaun's velocity. This is why I thought it'd be a perfect fit in Stefanski's system. I think they need a young quarterback because, well, they're paying Deshaun Watson a whole bunch of money, and we ain't going to talk about $50-some-odd million between three quarterbacks being divided up. That's just suicide for a team. What do you think Cleveland's going to do? What do you believe their outlook would be with or without Shador? And then tell me what you think about him as a player.
Yeah, so I think this shows that they're probably going Shador, right? Now, me, honest opinion, right? I like the Showtime stuff. I wanted to see Shador in New York with the Giants. I was trying to get, I wanted the bright lights, right? That's what I was going for. But I think it shows that, one, the Giants are not that confident that the Browns are going to pass on Shador. And Shador needs, the Browns need to take a quarterback, right? It's about that time to where they find a guy, because it was just a few years ago where everybody was saying, hey, the Browns may be a quarterback away, right? And now you look at this roster, they had some turnover, lost some key pieces, but you would think that trying to figure out what they look like with a good quarterback is something they would want to do. I mean, just last year, you seen the elevation just in them going from Deshaun Watson to Jameis Winston, right? Jerry Jeudy had a 1,000-yard season, and the offense started to look competent. They beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. What was that, a Thursday night game, I believe, when it was snowing? So you have to think that, hey, we have more of a ceiling to us if we find a young QB, and I agree with you. I think Shador in this Kevin Stefanski offense is exactly what he can operate. Some bootlegs, some play action stuff, get on the center, move around, but also play in the shotgun, get the ball out of his hands quickly. I think Shador is a more attractive QB piece to offensive coordinators because of his ability to fit the ball in tight windows than what the NFL draft community is saying, right? I think offensive coordinators like guys that can step in, go through my progressions, run the play I design, and deliver the football accurately. And you see that with Shador, and so that's why I think he's a lot more attractive than what NFL draft fans are saying.
You think people are scared off by the fact that Tom Brady coached him, mentored him, and the Raiders are sitting right there in striking distance, but they chose to go with Geno Smith?
Well, I don't think it's that, because I think if Shador fell, then I think they would have drafted him. I don't think it was a matter of being scared. I think those franchises, we talked about the Giants, them trying to find identity, the Raiders trying to find identity, right? What is the asking price for me to move up, right? The Raiders don't have a great roster to then go and offload 3 more first rounders, 2 second-round picks, and put themselves in that situation, right? Nobody wants to repeat the Carolina Panthers thing. The Carolina Panthers leveraged all of those picks, right? Moved up, got Bryce Young, and then we said, wait, they don't have any other players but Bryce Young, right? So I think other teams, and with Pete Carroll and Tom Brady, both of those guys, we have to look at their history, real talk, Tony. Tom Brady came in the league as a backup, but he was surrounded by good pieces. Pete Carroll, this is the same guy that made the move to draft Russell Wilson, but he already signed Matt Flynn, right? So he understands support systems around quarterbacks, and I think that they was like, hey, if we leverage everything, what does this quarterback have to throw? Who does he have to throw the football to? And I think that's what it's more about.
Yeah, all of that stuff matters. I'm going to tell you something. I learned something from you. We were on the squad show one night, and you talked about Abdul Carter, who I'm going to get to. And you mentioned the term stacked linebacker. I knew what it meant, but I had to really go and look at it, right? And really read up on it. I'm going to ask you this for a reason. I'm going to set this premise with you. Everybody, I don't know where all these Trayvon rumors coming from, but everybody wants to trade for Trayvon, and they're talking about we'll give you a day 3 pick. They don't watch real football. And I ain't just talking about the 20 and a half sacks the last 2 years. I'm talking about the game-wrecking ability. How many running backs, every time he tackles a running back, they go to the sideline holding their ribs or something because he's very, very physical. And everybody wants to either move him inside, which he gained weight last year, but he's losing it now. He wants to go back to being 270. That's one thing. The other thing is they don't realize you ain't gonna have no 270-pound 3 technique and then draft Abdul Carter. So I was always against it because everything was constituted by them moving Trayvon. There's a way, though, you could get Abdul Carter, and you ain't got to move nobody. Tell me how you're going to do it and what you think of him as a prospect.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, man. Abdul Carter, and he's listed in the bucket as edge rusher, right? And I'm assuming that's why the Jaguar fans or fans, period, feel like, hey, let's, if we draft him, we have to kick Trayvon inside. Well, that's not true because first of all, there's 3 downs to football, and there's various different situations, right? And Abdul Carter as a prospect, I'll start with him. I'll say this: that there's a comp to Micah Parsons, but as a stack backer, meaning an off-ball backer, right, not on the line of scrimmage. He's better than Micah Parsons.
Oh, that's what I was waiting for. That's it right there. Say it again.
He is better than Micah Parsons as a stack linebacker. He's more instinctive. He understands the run more. He understands run fits. And so he'll be able to play for you on first and second down. But like we said, there's various situations. So if you get a second and long and you think it's a pass, you can always walk him up, mug him up in the A gap. You can walk him up to the B gap. Or how about you put them on opposite sides or line them up next to each other on third and second downs and longs when it's obvious passing situations. But I think this, Trayvon Walker and you have Abdul Carter, there's no reason why they both can coexist at the same time and everybody can be put in the best situation to fit because Abdul Carter, in my opinion, I believe he's that versatile.
I think he is too. And I saw tape. There's a kid named Luke Altmaier that plays at Illinois. Luke Altmaier is probably dreaming right now. Every time he wakes up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, he see Abdul Carter because Carter was rushing him. He was playing off the ball. I saw a play. I can't remember who it was against, but he lined up at Mike. He was in the A gap. He took a step back, watched for the screen, saw the screen, and took a beeline horizontally down the line and right at the first down marker. And I'm like, that dude is what everybody has been telling me that the Jaguars should have been doing with Devin Lloyd. He's also what everybody keeps describing to me as what Jalen Walker is going to be. And it befuddles me a little bit that people don't get this concept. So I'm glad you explained that to Jaguar fans.
Yeah, and I want to just say this one other thing too, that linebackers are one of those overlooked positions, right? That nobody wants a linebacker until they need one, right? And usually they need them when it's too little, too late, when it's week 12 and they're checking the PFF stats and they're like, wait, our D-line is playing good. Like, why are we last in rushing, right? And it's because you don't have any linebackers. Those guys are very important. And I would challenge somebody to find a Carolina Panthers player to tell me that Luke Kuechly wasn't important at defense, right? Find a player on the San Francisco 49ers that tell me Fred Warner is not important, right? Linebackers are important. And as the run game becomes more important and it comes back as we shift that paradigm back again, that you will see how important linebackers are. So I say take them. If you like them, if you love them, definitely take them and draft them.
I think he can play stack linebacker and lead the team in sacks. I think that's what I honestly believe. And then a player like him, I think you really, really see how good Trayvon is then because now this thing gets elevated. And as he gets older, guess what? Josh moves on, stick him down there and 9 wide him to death all day long, in my opinion. I promised you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because another thing, too, while we're having this conversation is that when we talk matchups, we always talk defensive backs versus wide receivers, right? But imagine the luxury of you walk into a game and you get to say, okay, who is the weak link on the offensive line? And let's just go after him, right? And that's what having that combination of Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, and Abdul Carter, because now you can throw so many different looks to where you're constantly rushing the worst offensive lineman on that particular team. And then now that's where you're upwards of getting all of these different pressures and things like that. So that's what versatility does.
And I criticize Jerry Jones for team building, but I don't criticize him for being able to draft talented players. And when you watch Micah line up at off ball and lead the league in pressure since he's been in the league, I then think, did they move to LaMarcus Lawrence inside? Nah, he made like $100 million. What about the 2 dudes that Washington signed last year, Fowler and the other kid that I kept talking about, the 6'5", 6'4", 265-pound kid? What about the dudes that Dallas had to re-sign? They re-signed one this year, and then they lost another kid. They have always had edge rushers and Micah Parsons.
100%. That's the way to go, rushing in bunches.
Hey, man, I told you 28 minutes. It's 29 minutes, so I got to get you on out of here. We appreciate you, man. And everybody go over and check Keith Sanchez out at Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in to Locked On NFL twice a day here. And that's all we got for you today. I hope it's enough. I hope y'all full in the barbershop. We'll see you next time.